What's up, everybody? Hope you all are doing well today. I wanted to first and foremost say that I appreciate everybody that has put some information on the forum. I'm going to check those in the next couple of days. Just to get to know everybody a little bit better, and if y'all have some initial questions about some of the materials. But I want to just go ahead and jump into the conversation with our first chapter of Kim to talk a little bit about how we deal with social media through the organizational standpoint. And what I like most about this is kind of breaking down a little bit of how things are different within the components of social media, as well as uh, how people use it. And how the conversation kind of works, not only with us as an organization, but with the audience that surrounds it. I really do enjoy looking through Wikipedia articles, and this is not a call to actively cite Wikipedia, but I really enjoy it because I actually had a friend of mine that used to teach a class where part of it was a media writing class where they would edit Wikipedia pages. Kind of the area of it is, why are wikis so damn special? And part of it is that knowledge and truth change, so should the information about it. I read some articles that would talk about physics professors say it was where he goes for most of the update information about physics in a pinch. And again, that's not to say to cite it, but it is something where information can come out very quickly. Whereas things like textbooks or journal articles, and someone who's written in both of those things, it takes time, it's editing. And already for a book chapter that I help edit, I'll sit there and go, well, that's already irrelevant. The example I used is something that, yeah, may stand the test of time for a little while, but there are also some things that I'm like, I wish I could use a more up to date example. So that's what we're using here. And with that, part of this is all going to be on how we work everything together. So this is a little bit of understanding consumer insights and how we implement them throughout your organizational vision here. So I like these graphs by Kim. And again, this is a little outdated in terms of how Kim describes some of this and some of her examples, but I do like mentioning about like organizational vision and how you have four separate entities with marketing, public relations, consumer service, product development, and administration, all kind of working to an organizational vision. Whereas now within social media, it's all kind of the same front of people working together to adhere to that organizational vision. And I already would challenge you, even before you're present, that you go and talk about some of your social media strategies with your presentations, is think about what your mission and goals are for any given brand. Because all of this is going to be basically interdependent parts of how people use these things. So things like public relations is also your customer service. An example of that might be that you look at an airline, for instance. So an airline will have somebody on service on social media to be able to address any questions. So let's say, for instance, that you have a really bad flight or a flight got delayed or canceled, which is an all too common problem. Customer service is something you could do by tweeting out like, hey, United or American or Delta, this went wrong. I'm very upset. I was looking forward to this vacation or going to see my family. So the fact that even if you have very few followers, and I've done this before, they will answer you by saying, I'm sorry you feel that way. Please send us a DM. So this is actually part of their marketing and public relations in this case, because we're starting to see a little bit of how they address things in their PR on social media, but also kind of talking about their brand in particular. And so if you have an organization that is fueled by the idea of being able to engage in customer service and making sure that people have a safe flight wherever you're going, this is all part of it, and it can work interdependently because of things like your social media. And it's the same thing with product development, for instance. as you're moving along in whatever product you're making, there are going to be changes that you make, whether it be through focus groups, feedback, comments, and addressing customer service can all be part of that as well. So you can see that all of these work together in a way within social media. And it's one of the reasons that we talk a lot about the definition of strategic communication instead of necessarily advertising or PR. And I stress that because when you're talking about these two things, yes, they are different, but there are scenarios within social media that PR is more important in this scenario, whereas in another situation, advertising is more important in this particular scenario. So a lot of this is not only approaching this in such a way that all of these things are interdependent and interconnected, but it's also communication needs to be humanized. So it's really necessary to be able to speak the language of whoever you're talking about and your audience here. So, and that can be very difficult because there's kind of a uncanny valley of language to where somebody will sit there and go, using a term that you might not be cool enough to pull off. So I will refrain from doing that because I think if I use any sort of jargon, it'll make it so that nobody wants to use it anymore. But you can think about what I'm talking about here is brands using terms that kind of mean something else. As I wrote in my About Me section, one thing that I stress is that I'm a big West Ham fan. So they play in the English Premier League. So this is soccer / football. And one of the things that I liked about it most was there was the organization tried to say, we are massive. So that means you're a big club. You have a lot of big wins, so forth. So they were good last year. And so fans did this chant of saying West Ham are massive. And so the organization tried to go with that and run with that chant. What they didn't realize is that a lot of the fandom kind of said it ironically because a lot of the fans are sitting there going, well, here's the thing. We haven't been good for a while. We've only reached success. So it's kind of tongue in cheek, that chant. So being able to say that can have a little bit of blindness in the organization. And I can go into a couple examples, but I'll refrain of where an admin for a social media account kind of messed things up in this case. But jargon is important though. So if you can speak your fans' language in such a way that they can understand and they can appreciate. The Buffalo Bills are actually really good at doing that. That's actually a very, very good social media account to look up. As same with the this is minor league baseball, but the Savannah Bananas. That's a really good social media account to look into. So in this case, giving back to those who communicate and understanding the primary stakeholders that are very much involved with your organization, very much enjoy your organization, giving back really helps in this case. So if you have someone that supports your brand, it's really good to, one, use real people to talk with that person, but also listen to your stakeholders and give them a spotlight every now and again, because that goes a long way. So that's kind of the main thing that I want to talk about when it comes to this in particular. And it's, again, very important to know that although these are separate departments, when it comes to social media, you have a lot on your plate. And this is why I talk about people who are social media managers for their organization. They're like, it's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week job. You are on call almost all the time because, who's to say that somebody's going to reach out? Who's to say that there's going to be a crisis and you are going to be required to answer for those should they arise. You are a very front line of defense in that case. So let's move down. I would love to hear some of y'all's thoughts next week about these 2 chapters, but I want to look at this right here. So there's a 4-step model that Kim brings in that I love because it really talks about a great deal of how we determine communication and evaluation. So the social media 4-step model works in a lot of different ways, but the idea here is we have a lot of flexibility based on our community. So stakeholders, publics, And I can look at no better implementation of this model than the gaming industry. So I'm going to use one example of a game that I like to play pretty frequently. I was playing it last night, as a matter of fact, which is Elden Ring. So Elden Ring is a From Software video game. It's notoriously difficult, but it's also got a very loyal fan base that love to go on YouTube and talk things like lore videos or strategies to beat a boss that, again, are notoriously difficult. They rate weapons. They talk about builds, which basically is like how you form and shape your character. So a lot of this is going to be based on how we can enjoy the game to A, make it a little bit easier, B, to strengthen the community. But these are things that a organization has to pay attention to. And From Software and the people who work on Elden Ring, they listen. And sometimes for better and for worse. And I'll get into that for a minute here. So the step one for any of this is to do into a little consumer insights and listen to your stakeholders. So in the case of Elden Ring, what this means is you will have a group of people that are producing videos or showing tricks. A lot of people will test the boundaries of your game. And so gaming companies will ultimately look at strategic design and say, this is a want. We know that people want this game. And so this is a big push. So the design of it was how we're going to promote a open world game, how we're going to bring in some new characters and so forth. And it flew off the shelves. It was really, really good. But then you go into implementation and monitoring. And this is where what I was talking about comes into play. If there are scenarios where people test the game, people take advantage of something that you may have forgotten. And I mean, it's a game. It's tough to get these down. But this is where game developers create patches where this implementation comes into play. And so if you have a weapon, for instance, that is too overpowered, they'll do what's called nerfing it, which basically means they'll reduce the stats and make it a little bit more fair for everybody that competes with them. Or if a boss is just ludicrously more difficult, they can nerf that as well. Or they could say, okay, this particular build or this particular weapon isn't getting enough recognition. So let's, give a few more stat points in direction of making it a little bit better. There was a really good YouTube video that would show how you can skip a notoriously difficult boss. And yours truly took advantage of that, which was kind of funny because I got excited about it on a subsequent playthrough because I was like, oh, okay, I can just do this again. Well, it turns out they fixed it. They fixed the patch. They were paying attention to the stakeholders. And I admire that. I don't admire it because I had to fight said boss, but I admire the fact that they were really paying attention to their community. So when they were doing early releases of this game, and this can go back into listening and strategic design, they had a beta test. So basically, they released an early access copy for influencers to review it, talk about it, what works, what doesn't. And so that could make it into the main game. But as you move along, and this is something that's kind of cool because this is a game that was released, what was it, last year. They're still making patches. They're still creating new content to make the game potentially more fair for people that are either just trying the game or are really into it, et cetera, et cetera. And then goes into evaluation. So checking for bugs and problems. In some cases, some people are really happy and others they're not. So in these games, I'll sit there and go, there's something that I really wanted. I played a certain play style, and all of a sudden they pushed the stats back for a while. And I'm not going to lie, that made me a little upset because I was like, oh, this is my weapon. This is how I play. And now you took that away from me. So I was kind of bummed out. But, it is kind of interesting through that evaluation that a lot of people were really happy about it, about how this changed over it. So these things that have holes, they go back into the listening stage. And again, this goes over and over of how many how many problems that can occur, but how much you can fix it. And it's nice when you have crowdsourcing and being able for influence to share their opinions, because this gives a really good opportunity for you to make these changes. And one more thing I'll mention is you got to remember that in an organization, you're going to have a lot of stakeholders. So, and they may have different goals. So, in the case of video games, you might have people that are casual, they're called let's players. You might have people that are speed runners. You might have people that try to test the boundaries of your game through glitches and so forth. There are a lot. You may have people that are interested in the story. There are a lot of different ways to play a game. And because of that, we have many different ways that we need to think about how we promote something and how to listen to our stakeholders. So, if there's something that helps a speedrunner, so like skippable cutscenes, for instance, that saves time for their playthrough. That's something that they may want. And I will say right off the bat that you might listen to this and say, well, Dr. Daniel, I don't care about video games. And that's fine. I would encourage you to think of some of your own examples of how organizations listen, implement their design, monitor how the consumers talk about it through their insights, evaluate all that, and then go back into that process. I will mention that one of the reasons that I use gaming as my primary source of examples for some of this stuff is because they're usually the people up in the front of your, what do you call it, early adopters, innovators, and so forth. They take a lot of chances, they fail constantly, but they just keep going into it. And this is one of the reasons why I like looking at this particular market, is because a lot of these topics we're going to be talking about is where gaming has really started that. So I will make sure to diversify a lot of my examples, but that was one I wanted to talk about with this particular model. So anyway, I'm going to stop it right there. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will be talking with you all very soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.